Happy New Year to you, Kojo and team, and many happy returns.
All right, now stay with us for just a moment. I want you to hear some of the messages that have come through on this topic. Raymond.
This one, Mr. Primakov says, indeed, the free SHS must be reviewed. The kids are suffering and food supplies must be decentralized. That will allow head teachers to even get food on credit. We should stop punishing our kids that way. Free SHS review now. And this one, @like_dreams. This is not something that we must debate. It's something that must be taken care of. You just heard head of schools cautioning students to bring enough foodstuffs. And at EKB_junior, even the MPP wanted to review it. At Ghana Prince, make SHS tuition free. Let students pay for their feeding. If they cannot, e-blocks await them. They will eat at home and go to school. At I Am Prince, the Director General of the Ghana Education Service and all his deputies must be sacked with immediate effect. They forced charge to reopen schools, knowing very well that there aren't enough food to feed the students. Just wanted to please President Akufo-Addo and the NPP government. Now, see this embarrassment. At Shiny Bossman, when we say free SHS is destroying our schools, mediocre mindsets do not understand. I hope the new government will be bold to cancel it. Well, this one says, good morning, Kojo. If you read this, do it anonymously. Indeed. I sent my daughter to school, Wesley Girls, this past weekend. Speaking to the students, they were indeed being fed poorly. And this is Wesley Girls. Wow. We know that the standard of feeding in some schools, Wesley Girls is one of them. But this is Wesley Girls. Said they're being fed poorly. They look so hungry to the extent that I was moved to get some food around the market close to the school for them. Come and see the joy in their faces. The free SHS must be reviewed to take all concerns on board. Feeding is particularly a problem. Everyone knows. And that's how this is actually going. So that's some of the messages that hopefully today, parents like this one can mention the name of the schools for their children and not be afraid to tell us their kids are suffering.
Yeah.
Hopefully, head teachers, like the way they've come out.
Yeah.
Since the gag order appears to have been removed now, yes, we can now have the conversations we want to have about our senior high schools.
Yeah.
And you will not be termed as a radio station in Accra waging a war against the policy.
SHS,
Yeah.
indeed.
But you know, guys, even for parents, it's expensive. Feeding is expensive because we know that prices of foodstuffs are.
Oh yeah.
So it's actually like an impossible call to say that only government should take care of that aspect. I know that parents will understand, especially when you want to feed a balanced diet. We're not just talking about feeding. We're not just saying rice, and oil. You want to give the children a well-balanced diet.
Amavi, let me disagree with you. See, we as a republic, we waste money on frivolous things. We waste money on projects. This country, in its rightful sense, spent 250 million and more doing all African games. I propose to you,
Dollars.
yes, that money could have been, if it is actually given to feeding in schools, would have been better used for our education of our young people. So we can have that conversation. But I reject that claim that this country that raises taxes from people cannot raise enough money to feed its students in their schools. I reject it. Let's not pretend that we don't have priorities. Everybody knows that health, education are top priorities. We are not saying that go and be paving or doing asphalt in every corner of the country. It is possible. Let's not give government excuses because they waste the money on irrelevant things. I'll tell you, we can remove people who are useless in this country and give them money to feed in schools. I've always maintained that the concept itself was not something I agreed to. But people insisted in this country that we could never do targeting. Seriously, they told us. We gave alternatives. They said no.
Even the finance minister himself said target it.
Yeah.
But we said
if I reached the point, they made us feel that it is only beneficiaries, there be wrong beneficiaries of cocoa marketing board scholarship, who are insisting that we should do the same thing so that their fathers will hijack the space like they hijack the CMB scholarships.
Imagine.
That's a claim they were making.
Yeah.
This state that actually developed a common targeting mechanism all of a sudden could not do anything close to that.
Look,
we can feed them. Let's feed them fully and properly.
Let's talk about it. Kofi Asare joins us. He's the executive director of the Africa Education Watch. Now, Kofi, I mean, you've heard the views of some of our listeners, but I want to look at this thing from a practical point of view. This is a screw up. Somebody screwed up. Who? At what point did this slip up to the point where we are reopening schools without food or funds to feed the kids?
Not really, Bonnie. I think that the food issue is not new. It's a recurring one. It comes and goes. And it is not the case that schools do not have food at home, but then they lack some necessary, ingredients. There are about 18 food items on the list of food supplied by the first stock. That is the centrally procured and supplied food stuff sent to the schools. And then the schools use their subvention to acquire the perishables, like fish, egg, and that stuff at the school level. So some of these food items are in scarce supply. For some of them, I can't even say scarce supply because the students are used to not having them again. For example, bread. In the northern regions, in the past year, over a year, the bread is history. So breakfast is only cocoa takora. So you have some items not being there, but then you have some items being there. Rice is sufficiently available, which is people, etc. So it is not the case that there is a blackout or total shortage of food, but some essential ingredients that make up the food basket in the senior high schools are in the rapid supply. And that is not because there is no food in the system. It is because of a liquidity challenge. We haven't solved the liquidity challenge from the beginning. The feeding arrangement under the free senior high school policy is not yet a system. It is nowhere near becoming a system. It was an ad hoc and has continued to be an ad hoc arrangement where politicians were directly involved in managing the procurement, distribution, and supply of foodstuffs. So immediately, there's a transition. You appreciate that there will be some changes, in the system, in the flow, because there is no system. It is not autopilot yet. It is still a work in progress activity. That is one of the challenges we are facing.
So really what I'm hearing is that, look, it's a liquidity issue, and also the school feeding program has just been a political procurement opportunity, never a system to feed children. So with a change of government, suddenly those who were getting money from that procurement arrangement are no longer doing so. Therefore, the school feeding program has... Is that pretty much what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that because it is a political arrangement, the suppliers themselves are sensitive to the transition. And so we detected inertia on the part of food suppliers from September. No one wanted to be owed. And so we started strict guarding in supplying food from September. Because we know that the history tells us in this country, whenever there's a political transition, feeding or food supply areas become a big issue. And then the politics sets in. And so from September, we saw significant inertia on the part of most suppliers, especially some of them from the buffer stock side, in supplying food. And so immediately election happened and then the transition was confirmed. You would expect that as a rational supplier or businessman, who understand the political economy of the free senior high school and the food distribution system, they will be hesitant. Especially again on the back of the NDC's promise to abolish this current centralized procurement system for food in senior high schools and introduce what existed prior to the free senior high school, which is a decentralized one where schools do the procurement and then the government or the Ministry of Education and Engineering supervise procurement. Because the suppliers are bulk suppliers and they are aware that this system would obviously, take many of them out of business, they are also cautious to continue to supply. Because if you continue to supply, you can't see the future of your business, and you also do not know whether or not you are going to get paid today or not. So the uncertainty is it's one of the issues for the emergencies we are recording today, apart from the systemic deficiencies that exist. What we need is a level of assurance from the government that even though it has promised to decentralize the procurement of food to senior high schools, it doesn't intend to do it suddenly and instantaneously. Definitely there should be a transitional period. And so that assurance should offer some comfort to suppliers that their contracts will not be terminated immediately, or their services will not be required, or their debt owed them will be paid. Right. If that assurance is given in the interim, I'm sure the inertia in supplying foodstuffs, would have been resolved in the interim.
It strikes me that what you are describing is something that would have been obvious during the transition period. It would have been obvious to the incoming government that this potential problem was awaiting them because of the politicized nature of the school feeding program. What should they have done to forestall? I mean, you've talked about giving assurances to the suppliers, but should they have in some way provided the liquidity so that schools could reopen without any break in the supply chain?
Yeah, as I explained to you, everything we are discussing at the base is a liquidity issue. It's a cash flow issue. So if you were not owing any supplier, there wouldn't be any hesitance in supplying. It is a cash flow issue because suppliers in this country, we're all aware of, at a point were owed over 1 year. You understand? So the cash flow issue couldn't have been solved by the transitional team because an issue that has been solved in 7 years cannot be solved in 1 month. And if you understand the dynamics of the cash flow issue, you would appreciate that the solution many times does not lie with the Ministry of Education. It is an issue with the Ministry of Finance and their cash flow and how their cash flow does not sufficiently align to the cash flow for providing education service in accordance with the academic year timetable. That incongruity is the reason. And so the transitional team couldn't have done anything about what has existed for 7 years. And then worst of all, where the actors are aware that the bulk supply business is ending because of the promise to decentralize it, you obviously expect that as rational businessmen or investors, they will exhibit some form of retreat or inertia, in continued supply. So for me, this is not unanticipated. Based on the politicized nature of school feeding contracts, and secondly, and most importantly, on the back of the promise to end the centralized procurement system and decentralized feeding to the schools. With these two, it is very well anticipated that we will have this disruptions in the supply of foodstuff to schools. But it didn't start now.
How long will our children be forced to go to school under these conditions before some sanity can be brought to the system?
Well, in our proposal, and let me indicate that as part of our work with the Ministry of Education, we have a plan and a project to begin working closely with the ministry as part of the transition process to think through a workable roadmap okay, for transitioning from the current centralized food distribution system, food procurement and distribution system, to the envisioned or the promised decentralized system. We believe that with our experience observing the system, it is something that should be done carefully and slowly. It shouldn't be a sudden migration. It should be a gradual process with a transitional plan, with the plan having various cushioning mechanisms to ensure that there is a seamless transition. And so we are ready to provide that technical support to the Ministry of Education. What I also want to indicate is that at the moment, the problem of school feeding is a liquidity challenge. But within the context of the liquidity challenge, it is the immediate issue is the unwillingness or the initial or the part of school suppliers who are not sure about the future of their contract. A statement by the a statement by the new government to the effect that the contracts are not automatically terminated and that supplies will be paid, etc. And the statement from that side should give a certain degree of comfort to investors in the food supply chain, so that the inertia we are experiencing, is reversed. It is possible once that statement is issued from the government. That is what we need now. Leadership.
So a statement would be the short-term fix, and you expect that once that is done, the suppliers will kick into gear, start providing these items for the schools, and the kids will then have food.
And in the long term, we fix the liquidity issues. It doesn't appear as if the current government is interested in tackling the cost implications of feeding. And the promise that is made in response to the free senior high school did not include allowing parents to pay for feeding. And so, so far as that promise is not part of their manifesto, and it doesn't appear, as I keep saying, the only government that reasonably would, make those changes was the NPP government, and they refused to do it. And so it becomes a political trap. And so no government would like to do that. So eventually what is going to happen is that the cash flow problem, the financing deficits for the free senior PCD will never go away until we come to the realization that the public system can only finance the feeding of senior high schools in arrears, partly in arrears. And then we continue. Other than that, there's no way. We have made proposals to cushion the financial muscle of the Ghana Community Exchange and the buffer stock. For example, giving them the power to raise credits, to pre-finance orders. But as the government intends to decentralize, it means that arrangement cannot be done. The senior high school should rather prepare to take over procurement. And so, for now, it's a fluid situation, but I believe that the situation can only be managed by still accumulating arrears and then paying them gradually. I don't think that we'll get to a point where we will have shortage of food solved in this country unless we come to the realization that you cannot feed everyone in senior high school and pay that cash, in real time. It's not possible because the cash flow of the public finance system cannot support that timely payment. It will always be in arrears, and we must appreciate that.
What percentage of the cost in training a child in a senior high school, say for an academic year, is dedicated to feeding?
The feeding budget of the free senior high school is about 70%. So if we are spending about 3 billion cedis a year on free senior high school, about 70% is feeding.
Just feeding.
And beyond feeding, the other items are uniforms, exercise books. Look, so the whole program is about 90% procurement. But about 70% is feeding. And even this 70%, This is a very, very, very compromised feeding arrangement. As I've told you, for over a year, in a northern region, there is nothing like bread. In other regions, there are many other regions, nothing like bread. It's only cocoa sakura. So that is what I'm calling feeding, and that is what is taking up 70%. So if you have to feed the way we were being fed when we were in senior high school, secondary school, by getting cocoa and bread, obviously you will be spending even more. But within this current feeding arrangement where parents are complaining that their children are not being properly fed, where students are also complaining that they are not properly fed, we are spending up to 70% of the 3 billion a year free senior school budget on feeding. And this is the quality of feeding that 70% is able to procure.
Kofi, is this call by CHAS now for parental support in the interim? Is this sustainable? How long can we go with this?
I think the call is only a reminder. So far as we are concerned, the last time we did a research on the cost incidence analysis of the free senior school to ascertain the cost of secondary education borne by parents, the government, our finding was that parents were bearing about 70% of the cost of secondary education, and government was paying 30%. And parents' share of the cost of secondary education, that is 70%, was 90% provisions. So there is data, to strongly suggest that parents are already spending hugely, in supporting the feeding of their children in school. So CHAS's call is only a reminder, but the reality is that your ward needs provisions. They actually rely on their provisions to supplement what is said. For example, the example I gave you, if we are in a northern region school or in one of the schools that have been doing cocoa sakura for years, obviously a parent will be buying biscuits or something, to balance the carbohydrates in the morning. So CHAS's call is nothing new. There's nothing new about it. It's only a reminder, but that's the reality. It's always been there. Yeah.
But are you saying that even with this policy, parents were bearing about 70% of the cost?
Yeah, 72%. Read our free senior school cost incidence analysis. The cost of secondary education is categorized into 4. The cost of transport, that is 1. The cost of provisions, that is 2. The cost of free senior high school, that is 1. This is 3. And I mean the cost borne by free senior high school. And then there's also another cost for incidentals, and then personal effects. So these were the cost categorizations we analyzed in our free senior high school cost incidence analysis. And between 2017 and 2022, government was spending only about taking care of only 28% of the cost of secondary education. That was about 1,200 a year on the average, and parents were taking care of the lion's share. And because of the double track which was running, we realized that parents would pay for transport about 6 times in an academic year, even though we are 4 semesters. You go and come. You do 4 trips in a semester, so you do about 8 trips in 2 semesters. And if your child is a student in Bishop Portes, one of the schools we sampled, and we live in Accra, you know what it means to go to Saturday and back 8 times. So the cost on transport, the cost of buying provisions for students because of the inadequacy of meal fare were very, very significant in the parents' cost. I've not added other things like incidental, other books that parents procure. We didn't even add the cost of extra classes while they are home. And so parents are already supporting in the in the sharing of the cost of secondary education, and government is also supporting. So I see CHAS's call to parents as a reminder, but the reality is that every parent is buying provisions. Some of us who are PTA members in 1 or 2 or 3 schools because we sponsor students to senior high schools, we know how much we are paying to our PTAs to support them in buying food to augment the quality of food there. So it is not new, but they are only reminding parents, or they were reminding parents that as they were opening schools, they shouldn't forget, to beef up the food stock in the school by giving their children more food, so that if you don't have enough food, you can survive on yours. I spoke to a senior high school this morning in the Upper East region, for instance. They don't have oil. Some schools are using margarine, to replace oil.
Is margarine not more expensive than oil?
No,
It depends on oil.
It's about what you have. You manage
Right.
what you have.
It's
Some of them have sugar stock that can last only 10 days. Some of them are borrowing oil from nearby schools. They are managing the situation, you understand? And so, if you have provisions, check to your parents, you will fall on them as and when you think it is necessary.
Yeah,
So
but Kofi, why
parents can
is
always
Chas
support.
speaking now? My memory is not that short. This is just about the first time that they have been so open about this call.
Well, I think Chas has been open about the challenges in feeding. They have been very open about the challenges in feeding. Headmasters have not been open, but Chas have been open about the challenges in feeding. There were times where Chas threatened to close down schools in Eastern region. They issued a statement because money for running the schools and buying food from their 30% local suppliers have been arrested for over a year. Except that Chas is also trying to take advantage of the transition and demand that old senior high schools that date as far back as 2021, because such debts have been hanging and haven't seen or didn't see any political will to service since. And so what Chas is demanding is not about cash to run schools now, and then arrears, not only in feeding, but in other lines that are used to run the schools. That data as far back as 2021. But it's important to say that some payments were made to schools on Monday. So most of the senior high schools who are on commercial bank accounts received their funding on Monday. But those who directly do business with Bank of Ghana are yet to get their money. That payment, yes, I understand. It's a fraction. It's a very small amount of money. But at least it must be acknowledged that it is something that the schools can manage in buying the the perishables that they need and the consumables they need to cushion the running of schools. So we hope that the Bank of Ghana will expedite their transfer process so that the schools with Bank of Ghana accounts can also receive that money and then also manage it.
Kofi, I want to thank you for your time with us. This has been really insightful. You've really broken down the situation and helped us understand it from various angles. Churchill.
Well, look, this is something we've talked about before. When Ken Oforiatta talked about the fact that he felt he could pay and so shouldn't allow the state to pay. At the time, Mustafa Hamid, who was information minister, felt that whole statement was unnecessary. But this is the thing for me. You ask yourself, so where do we get the money to fund free SHS? It's from our collections, the consolidated fund. Now, when you have a program of this nature, sometimes it's very important you have dedicated funding.
True.
The moment you don't have dedicated funding, it means you're relying on government to actually make available funding. And the government expenditure is such that there are competing interests. So where the person decides that, I can actually hold on. So this is a national food buffer, national buffer food company or whatever, buffer stock. We can hold on. We can hold on with the suppliers for a very long time until we go back to make payment. They will delay. And the time that the money will be needed the most will be the time that you probably may not have funds to pay them, and so then they start agitation. One would expect, and there's been this conversation before, that a portion, if we really want to do this, a portion of, say, our petroleum funds should go into the funding of education. Or we could have actually made available a portion of Get Fund. Get Fund is supposed to go into the provision of infrastructure or whatever. We could have made available a portion of Get Fund to actually go into the funding of free SHS. Because as it stands now, to be very honest with you, I don't in my world see how free SHS is supposed to be competing with all government interest for funding. I don't see it. And this is the other point. Look, the whole approach, the National Food Buffer Company is supposed to buy food from farmers and distribute to state agencies, and also buy food from farmers to prevent post-harvest losses. So ordinarily, when it comes to the National Food Buffer Company, sometimes people go and supply to them at very low rates. Anybody who's done business with National Food Company will tell you. You could be buying maize on the market at say 600. They would offer 450 and say supply to us at 450. That's how much we are prepared to pay you. That's it. They take it at farm gate prices. Now, if they take it at farm gate prices and still are unable to pay these people, then there's a problem. But again, what has been the approach of the National Food Buffer Company? It's been the appointment of persons who have believed to have served in bringing the government into office, and so it is a reward for them for the work they did in the past. So what they do, and in this case, you've had some party officers being made to supply food to these institutions and are being paid. So what do you expect? I am all for giving headmasters a chance. We decentralize it. But I think that it's about time we had a conversation about a dedicated fund for free SHS. One that we can track and say, this is how much we need for free SHS. This is how much comes in. Look, we can just say a percentage of, say, GET Fund would go into supporting free SHS. No problem.
Except that GET Fund itself has never been able to meet its projects and complete. Let me give an example. Legon, projects that were supposed to be completed by GET Fund some time before 2009. Some of them are still sitting there.
I know.
So effectively, that's in itself a problematic source. I agree with you. But if we are allowed as a people to have conversations about how to deal with free SHS, if that review word was not seen as a how do you call it? Haram, we would have been having some of these conversations, and maybe we all come around the table and discuss the alternatives available to us. For example, instead of pretending that there's a COVID levy that should be on our books today, how about we thinking of such an alternative, converting it?
Yes, COVID levy becomes the free SHS levy.
Brilliant.
We can do that.
Others have said, I don't care if e-levy is converted to, say, a free SHS levy.
Yeah.
I do not have a problem with that. I know I'm contributing something sensible, not pretentious. I'll create jobs for you. I hope you get my point. Yeah. So some of these options should be discussed, and let's not.
And you see, Raymond, let me just add this before you come in, Mama. I do not understand governments of Ghana. You say you think about the people. Me, I say I want to pay my child's school fees. Then you tell me that if you want to pay your child's school, you take your child to a private
school.
But I say I want to pay.
And this is the executive lead of the country.
I say I want to pay my child's school fees. I hope, I just pray and hope. Look, if President Mahama says he wants to have a national economic dialogue, let the people in that dialogue tell President Mahama what they want. If the general consensus is that free SHS in its current state is not what the people want, and parents are willing to pay, he should let parents who are willing to pay. And let's target those who cannot pay. What happened to, why don't we do LEAP in this country that targets the extreme poor in this country, that is able to assist them? I don't have a problem. If we want to do the free SHS and we want to use, say, COVID-19 levy to fund free SHS, I don't have a problem. I would pay. But because at least the problem here is that people, we have just not done well with the system. We're unable to pay. Look, Raymond, I went to Mali School in December 2022. This is not the first time I've said this.
Yeah.
When I asked the children, have you eaten? They said no. I said, who taught you people how to lie? I saw you eating. They said what they had was not food. And that they had Tom Brown without bread and sugar. That cannot be considered as food.
You know, we've had people who are advocates for the free senior high schools, very respectable persons. Professor Peter Kofi, for instance, has talked about the fact that if you look at the country's finances today, there's no way that we can sustain this policy in its current form. I think it is very clear that right now, even the parent themselves, it is me, I am the parent, you are giving me free, and I'm saying that I am willing to support. I think the table should be created for people to come and share their views, and let's move this policy forward so that we can sustain it. It's been introduced already. It is here to stay, but it cannot in the form that it is in now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like lies. You call the thing free, but by all analysis, over 70% of it is paid for by parents. So it's not free. Let's just start from that point, that the thing that you wanted to do, you haven't done it. It's not free. Now, while I support suggestions of thinking outside the box, on how to fund it, like maybe convert the COVID levy, and create a fund solely to fund free SHS. While I am interested in some of these ideas, I am not interested in paying any tax that will result in procurement for politicians. I am not interested in that. I want to pay for children to be fed. And in fact, the people who want to do that the most are their own parents.
Yeah.
So why are we struggling? Why is this difficult? Why can we not educate children when the parents are willing to fund their boarding?
I mean, they're buying food and going to the schools and packing for the kids to come and sit in the car and eat the food anyway.
No other example. None. Zero. Go round the globe. I can think of no other nation where the state pays for the boarding of the children. I can think of none. So it is certainly not best practice. So what is it that we are trying to achieve? What are we trying to achieve? Even Nkrumah didn't want to do it this way. Even Nkrumah, who even came up with the whole progressively free blah blah blah, he didn't want to pay for their boarding. Is that what is that what was in the original policy? So where from this? What are we doing? Let's educate the children. Let's make sure that we don't malnourish them in a bid to look good for ourselves. Let us not play politics with the children's nutrition, their health, their safety, their welfare. Let's not do that. Our constitution says that in all things, every decision that we make that involves a child, it is the best interest of the child that should be paramount. Not you looking good or you having a presidential legacy. That is not paramount. It is the interest of the child. I think I've said enough.